Welcome to the podcast today. My name is Heather Biggar, and I am the implementation coordinator for the Maine Children's Trauma Response Initiative, which is a federally grant-funded program through the National Child Traumatic Stress Network and SAMHSA. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker for Maine Behavioral Health Care based out of Portland, Maine. Joining me today on the call is Irene Clements, who is the executive director of the National Foster Parent Association. She's also the public policy chair and former president of the Texas Foster Family Association. Irene also serves as the chair of Every Child Inc. Board of Directors and serves on the Texas Children's Justice Act Task Force, as well as the Collaborative Council to the Texas Supreme Court's Permanent Commission on Children and Family. Welcome to the podcast today, Irene.
Thank you.
So we're going to be talking on this podcast about the importance of advocacy on behalf of children who are in the foster, kinship, or adoptive care systems. Now, Irene, you and your husband have over 27 years of experience as foster parents or resource parents. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Goodness. And during that time, you fostered over 125 children with a wide variety of special needs, correct?
That's very true.
Yeah. And my understanding is you've also adopted, you're the adoptive parents of 4 children.
Yes, we are.
Clearly, you bring a lot of experience to this topic, both personally and professionally. It's great to have you on the call today.
Well, I'm thrilled that y'all want to cover a little bit of the topic of advocacy. So important.
Great. So, given your extensive experience, I wonder if you could talk a little bit about how you've seen the role of resource parents change over time.
Certainly. When we first started back in the 1970s, the role of foster parents was really not very well understood. I mean, it was kind of like we were, well, the old saying, 3 hots and a cot, a place for the kids to have a place to sleep, good food, a place to be kept safe. But it really wasn't recognized that the crucial and critical role that foster parents play, or resource parents play, in the overall scheme of how children are prepared to reach permanency. So we had to make some recognitions back then and really start to work on how to help the systems that were managing the foster care programs understand the role of foster parents, so that foster parents and resource parents could get a voice at the table, be a part of the planning for these kids, a part of information not only for the caseworkers but for the courts. And that was a not an easy thing to do, but it was certainly one that culminated in federal law stating that foster parents have a right for notice of all court hearings as well as a right to be heard.
Great. Wow, so a lot has changed.
A lot has changed, yes.
Yeah.
Foster parents are really seen now as, one of the key players in preparing children for whatever their permanent outcome is going to be.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, I know you are very well known for your unwavering advocacy within the work of the foster care and disabilities arenas. And one of the essential elements of trauma-informed parenting that comes from the resource parent curriculum developed by the National Child Traumatic Stress Network is to be an advocate for your child. And this is a key piece of the curriculum that we want to make sure resource parents understand and have an appreciation for their role in this capacity. We know that trauma can affect so many aspects of a child's life, and that it takes a team of people and agencies to really help navigate the systems and provide support that's necessary for recovery and healing. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit from your experience about the importance of the resource parent's role as an advocate on behalf of their child.
Well, it's critical. Children don't have a voice on their own. And that's why I always say, well, nobody ever pays attention to kids because they don't vote. Well, it's a true statement. So the adults that are significant to that child have to speak up. And that becomes the foster parent, or the resource parent, as we call them nowadays, is to become the 24/7 caretaker and the person who knows the child best. And I think that's why those early recognitions in the early 70s was so important to us, that without the advocacy piece from the caregiver themselves, we weren't really going to know the true child and the strengths of the child as well as the needs of the child. And the thing about trauma-informed parenting becomes more critical now, because so many children are going into relative care, kinship care, that what we're seeing across the country is the kids entering formal foster care where they need foster parents or resource parents. The children have higher needs. And so the skill level and the knowledge level and the supports needed by these families who step up to do this critical work is more important than ever. Without trauma-informed parenting skills, it'd be very difficult to get these kids to successful permanency.
Great. So that leads us into my next question for you actually, is really talking about the needs of the resource parents themselves. Mm-hmm. So in order to be an advocate for your child, we know that you also need to be an advocate to some degree for yourself as well. And so I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that need and the importance of resource parents advocating on behalf of themselves.
Absolutely. It's mandatory. There's really no other way to put it. You can't give something you don't have. And so if a parent is totally burned out, they don't have anything left to give. And so it's important that those people supporting foster parents and resource parents understand the need for respite care, understand the need for, a quick phone call response when they call. It can't be put on the back burner, because typically resource parents don't call unless they just are kind of at their last hurrah with a child or something, and we all have to get better at that and start asking for help much earlier in the process. And it's not a sign of weakness or I can't do it, but a sign of I want to be my best for this child and I want to be able to give them the best care that they deserve. So how we can get the systems out there to recognize the need for supports to the parents that are doing this work is critical. Like I said, respite care is really important. People have got to have a break once in a while. But just having phone calls returned and people treating the caregivers with respect and as a part of the team goes a really long way in refreshing and renewing the caregivers. The other thing we have to always be cognizant of is that entire family. It's not just resource parents. It's a resource family. So we have to pay attention to what foster care is doing to the children, the biological and or adopted children in that family. Because the family unit has to stay whole, the family unit has to stay healthy in order to do the best work with the children who join that family for temporary basis.
Great. Absolutely. I think that that's a great point, and I'm glad you're bringing it up. And a lot of the supports you're referencing are really speaking about the systems there that are supposed to be providing a safety net, and that also speaks to the importance of really good policy related to children in care. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit, because I know you have done some work at both state and federal levels regarding policy change. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, and also speak to ways resource parents can get involved in that and advocate on behalf of a system-wide change.
The foster parents or resource parents can be advocates one-on-one for the child, that particular child in their home or children in their home. I think the best way to learn how to be an advocate is to first find a foster parent association, a local one, or a support group where you meet up with other people that are doing the same thing you are. You learn from them, and you start learning about what are the things that everybody's experiencing, what are the things that stand out that aren't working very well or should work better, or aren't happening at all that should be happening. And that's when you start becoming a real advocate. And so you can do that on the local level with that peer support kind of to bolster you on. But then as you become more comfortable with that level of advocacy, to move on and look at maybe something more regional in your area, and then certainly on your state level, and become an influencer of not only laws that are passed in your state, but policies that are passed by the state government that control the child protective services in your state. Most states have a state foster and adoptive parent association. It's a great place to get information, and certainly a great place to go to become an advocate, because they'll have people that do that and that can teach how to do that better. And of course, on the national level, the National Foster Parent Association is the national voice of foster parents, and that was what it was established for in the early 70s by the Children's Bureau, and that's what it is today. So becoming a part of and a member of something that really speaks to how do we make this better for everybody in the child protection system becomes important. And certainly in Washington, D.C., a lot of decisions are made, policies and laws are developed, and that trickles down to the state to make policies. And then we scratch our heads when it gets down to us on a local level and say, where in the world did that come from? Or why are they doing this? And it's because we hadn't paid attention to what was going on the federal level. And so it really becomes important then to learn to either speak out for yourself on that level, or to support those people who do. And so I always encourage people to become part of the National Foster Parent Association, to become a member, and let those folks know what it is you're thinking and needing, so they can do that work for you on a national level. The whole issue of advocacy is one that I think has created huge change in the past for foster care, but will continue to make huge changes. And there are some laws that are being discussed right now that we're very, very, very active in dialogue on a regular basis, because we think some of the ideas are awesome and we think some of the ideas might be harmful. And so become a part of that if you can, and show your support and lend your support to those people that can then do those kinds of things on a national basis.
That's great. I think it's really important to know that there are really passionate folks that are working hard to bring the voice of resource parents forward so that it is heard when policies are being made and decisions are being made, because it impacts them as a family system and also impacts the children that they're caring for. So it's great, really encouraging, and I'm glad to hear it's happening, and that there's opportunities for people to get involved. So before we end today, what's great. Before we end today, Irene, I want to give you the opportunity to share any final thoughts you may have for listeners.
Well, I'd like to just say for a second about how important trauma-informed parenting is. Mm-hmm. And it's not just that. It's everybody that touches the child needs to be trauma-informed. And so as an advocate, as a resource parent advocate, it's important to make sure that the school that your child goes to is trauma-informed, that the teachers understand those dynamics, that the therapists that they're seeing, if they are, that the physicians that they're seeing, that they understand trauma and how it manifests itself in children. All those people who touch the kids, we have to be more effective in how we approach these children. And the other point is that you're never, no matter how much training you've had, how much education you've had, you're never good enough. And that might sound scary, but we're never going to be good enough to meet the needs of these very special children who come into foster care. And so it's a constant need to improve. And I think that's what makes really strong, capable resource parents. Resource parents that understand that, okay, I've done this for 3 or 4 years and I've had training, now I know it all, because it's not possible to do that. And to seek the knowledge about how to be a better trauma-informed parent all the time is really important.
Great. Yeah, I know through the work with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, I know that's an important piece for us as well, is really continuing that opportunity for education and having easy access to some of the latest information and tools and resources. And so it's exciting to have that as well available for folks and getting it out there and disseminating it. So it's great. Well, thank you so much, Irene, for your time today and for your tireless work in this field. Your insights are really helpful, and I'm glad that we've been able to make them available for folks through this podcast. Thanks again for taking the time.
Well, you're most welcome.
Thanks.
This marks the end of this podcast. For more information about the Resource Parent Curriculum, please visit us online at learn.nctsn.org/RPC. Thank you for listening.